A warm welcome to all the delegates of International Special Education Exhibition 2020. It gives me immense pleasure to be here in the slot of transformation, and I am going to talk about creating inclusive society. So, at the outset, an inclusive society is a society that overrides the differences of race, gender, class, generation, and geography, and it ensures inclusion, equality of opportunity, as well as capability of all members of the society to determine an agreed set of social institutions that govern social interaction. So it was a definition given by an expert group meeting on promoting social development or social integration in July 2008. The World Summit for Social Development defines an inclusive society as a society for all in which every individual have an equal rights and responsibilities, and they have an active role to play for the development of a society. So such an inclusive society plays a very important role, and it should be based on the respect for all human rights and fundamental freedom, cultural and religious diversity, social justice, and the special needs of vulnerable and disadvantaged group, democratic participation, and the rule of law. So to say that when we talk about, my session will be mostly touching upon the needs of children with special needs, that is a person with disabilities. So there are different views in terms of creating inclusive society, and there are different society functions. So when we talk about those things, I think we need to focus on inclusive society functions. So inclusive society is nothing but it is the integration in all of its forms that may simply imply the existence of a stable community in which people can find a place. So this was given by Taylor in 2007, and when we talk about inclusive society, an inclusive society should be based on the fundamental human rights and values, that is, all human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. So they are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. So in this point of view, it is a society in which all members, regardless of their backgrounds, they are able and motivated to participate in civic, social, economic, and political activities. For this to be happen, legal, regulatory, and policy framework must be an inclusive in nature, and it has to uphold and promote an inclusive process in all areas of implementation, so that equal access to basic education, public space, facilities, and informations are ensured, and diversity and cultural pluralisms are respected and accommodated. So in this aspect, when we see the Indian Constitution, the fundamentals that are described in Indian Constitution underlines all the concept that we are talking about in inclusive society. So the Constitution, it declares India a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, assuring its citizen justice, equality, and liberty, and endeavors to promote fraternity. So the Constitution of India is the supreme law for India, and the document lays down the framework demarcating the fundamental political code, structure, procedures, powers, and duties of government institutions, and sets out fundamental rights, directive principles, and the duties of the citizen. So the preamble of the Constitution of India says that we, the people of India, having solemnly resolved to constitute India into a sovereign, socialist, secular, democratic republic, and to secure to all its citizens and justice, social, economic, and political, and liberty of thought, expression, belief, faith, and worship, equality of status and of opportunity, and also to promote among them all fraternity, assuring the dignity of the individual and the unity and integrity of the nation. So I think all these things are the fundamentals that we are talking about when we want to have an inclusive society in nature. So the fundamentals in creating an inclusive society has to promote all the respect for human rights and their freedom and the rule of law, both at national and international level. Every member of society, no matter what his or her economic resources, political status or social standing, must be treated equally under the law. The legal instruments ensure the guiding principles that will guarantee equity and promote inclusive society with justice and equal opportunities for all citizens. So maintaining the security of all individuals and their living environment is paramount in creating a feeling of inclusion and an atmosphere of participation in society. To create and sustain inclusive societies, it is critical that all members of society are able and motivated to participate in civic, social, economic and political activities both at local and national and international level. So opportunities to participate in decision making process that affect their lives, that will be best foster principle of inclusiveness. So inclusive society should provide an opportunity for the children with this person with the disabilities to take their own decisions, and there must be a freedom for people to express their diverse views and develop unconventional, unique ideas. So the members of society must have the confidence to engage and interact with each other and build mutual trust while acknowledging their differences. In order to encourage all inclusive participation, there must be universal access to public infrastructure and facilities such as community centers, research centers, resource centers, recreational facilities, public libraries with internet facilities, well-maintained public schools, clinics, water supplies and sanitation. So this will ensure social inclusion for better inclusive society. And equal access to public information, it also plays an important role in creating an inclusive society, as it will make popular participation possible with well-informed members of society. So information that pertains to the society, such as what a community owns, generates or benefits from, should be made available to all. And equity in distribution of wealth and resources is also one of the main critical fundamental element for an inclusive society. So because there should not be any higher or low economic socio status or financial status. So equity in the distribution of wealth and resources is another important element when we talk about inclusive societies. Another dimension of inclusive society is tolerance for and appreciation of cultural diversity. So as we know that India is divided with language, culture and everything, unity in diversity is our base which brings us together and we form an inclusive society. And it is a secular country. So education plays a critical role in this area when we want to build up an inclusive society, as it will provide opportunities for us to learn the history and culture of one's own and other society, which will cultivate the understanding and appreciation of other societies, cultures and religions. So in this aspect, we need to promote effective leadership, which is a vital part for developing an inclusive society, where leadership is a representative quality that society has to develop, and it connects the people and the leaders eventually and results a very positive result. And finally, there is a need to create positive narratives of an inclusive society of the future and enable each member of the society to share, understand and contribute to those narratives. So social inclusion focusing on creating conditions for equal opportunities and equal access for all is considered to be useful when describing the actual process involved in promoting social integration. So it is often more easily accepted as a policy goal as it clearly eliminates the connotations of assimilation that some associate with the term integration. Not all individuals and or groups in societies are eager to be integrated into mainstream society, but all strive to be included. So at the core of the most definition of social inclusion, it lies the concept of full participation in all aspects of life. So I have given all the dimensions and elements of social exclusion as well as inclusion. So when we talk about all the elements, cultural, social, economic, environment, physical, legal, political, spatial and relational aspect is forming a very important part in a social exclusion as well as social inclusion. So when we talk about social exclusion, exclusive policies and legislations are there, so which will affect the social exclusion, and a lack of respect for human rights, discrimination, intolerance, stigma, stereotyping and sexism, racism and homophobia. So these are some of the elements that throw upon light on social exclusion. Fear and psychological insecurity and lack of access to basic services including education, health care, clean water and sanitation, lack of access to decent work or employment, lack of resources to sustain livelihood, lack of access to land, lack of access to credit, lack of transparency in decision making, lack of access to political process, lack of access to information and communication, lack of transportation, lack of access to public spaces and physical insecurity, segregation, violence and abuse. So these are some of the factors that affect the formation of creating of an inclusive society. So when we talk about social inclusion, we need to empower all those things that I've stated above, and inclusive policies and legislations will bring an inclusive society in place by the application of law and act. Access to clean and safe places for living, working and recreation and must be ensured for building an inclusive society. Access to information and communication is also a vital form in an inclusive society, and a social protection, solidarity, respect for diversity, access to basic services, access to resources, access to transportations, accountable decision making process, accessibility, adequate income and employment opportunities, and for the last one, which is very important, affirmation of human rights and opportunity for personal development. So these are the fundamental things that has to be ensured, that has to be promoted and that has to be built upon for formation of inclusive society. So while we are talking about creating an inclusive society, we need to talk about the marginalized group. So marginalized group is a group of weaker section that they found socially excluded. So when we talk about development is to create an enabling environment for people to enjoy a productive, healthy and creative life. So development is always broadly conceived in terms of mass participation, whereas marginalization deprives a large majority of people across the globe from participating in the development. So it is a complex problem and there are many factors that cause marginalization. So when we talk about the characteristics of marginalized groups, they suffer from discrimination and subordination, and they have a physical or cultural traits that set them apart and which are disapproved of or by a dominant group, and they share a sense of collective identity and common burdens, and they have shared social rules about who belongs and who does not, like that, and they have a tendency to marry within that group, and it is the basic characteristics exhibited by the marginalized groups, and typical exclusion is taking place through this marginalization, and most groups that are coming under the marginalizations are women, or that is a weaker section. They think that a woman is not having that physical ability to do a certain jobs, or they don't have that ability when compared than with the men to do many tasks. So in this aspect they are getting marginalized and they are excluded in a society. So in that way we need to empower women, and we need to provide a quality education for them to excel in all areas of life, and they want to become independent and socially included. So there are different groups under marginalization. So like women, people with disabilities, and socially disadvantaged like scheduled caste, scheduled tribes, like that, and sexual minorities, and like transgenders and other people, and then children, and then aged people. So under this marginalized group, my topic, speech will focus upon the persons with disabilities. So inclusive society, what is the need for inclusive society for persons with disabilities? When we talk about person with disabilities, the aim of special education service that we are providing is mainly based on four things. That is, first one, they want to have a personal adequacy. So they should not depend on others for their own needs. So training should be concentrated in that aspect, so that their personal adequacy will be met. And then second one is social independence. So they want to be included in a society. So a social inclusion is a must for them to attain a respectable person in a society. So social independence. And then the third one is economic independence. So they need to stand on their own leg. They want to have their own opportunities. They want to have their own employment, like that. So in this aspect, when we want to create an inclusive society for persons with disabilities, we need to focus on all five aspects that I have discussed here. The main aspect is independent skill training for ensuring equal participation. So as a person with disabilities, they want to develop their own independent skills so that they can participate equally in a society. So the next one is to excel in their social independence and economic independence. They need to have an education, equal opportunity for all, equal participation, equal access for education. So in that concept, educational opportunities, depending upon their own special needs, it has to be tailored, and the special educational programs has to be designed, and their educational opportunities has to be met. And the next most important thing that we need to talk about when we want to discuss on creating inclusive society for persons with disabilities is accessibility or assistive technology. It is accessibility, it means the infrastructural changes, the infrastructural adaptations. So it is a main important thing for them to move around within the environment without any barrier. So barrier-free environment is very important. So the special physical space has to be accessible for them. And the next one is they need to have assistive technology to overcome their special needs. So in this aspect, I think if we want to develop a creative, inclusive society, then they need an assistive technology. Then second or fourth thing is attitudinal change. So it is the point where we need to focus on persons with disabilities and persons without disabilities. So we need to provide a positive attitude towards persons with disabilities. So the society's vision, society's attitude towards persons with disabilities has to be in a positive manner, and they have to understand that they are equal and they have all the abilities than their disabilities. So in that aspect, an attitudinal change is very important. And fifth point that I want to stress upon when we want to create an inclusive society, we need an inclusive policy and inclusive legal support for individuals with disabilities. So in this context, I am happy to say that we are have to include persons with disabilities by changing our own culture and priorities, value, respect, and openly we have to welcome them within the society, and we need to acknowledge, understand, and embrace the widespread nature of disability, and at the same time we need to train them and staff them, employ them in a particular organization, and provide an accessible communication to them for them to interact with the society in a more effective manner. And we need to invite the inclusive policies more for creating inclusive society, and we need to integrate disability history in our school curriculum so that the attitudinal change can be happen when they are in the school age itself, when the children with disabilities and children without disabilities mingle with each other, and they value the abilities of the children with disabilities, and they respect the individuals with disabilities. And we need to promote social inclusions in schools and make arrangements for all the possibilities to interact with the society in a more fruitful manner. The other important thing we need to focus on is to make the transport system more universally accessible. So in this aspect, I want to give small general tips that has to be kept in our mind, that language is very important when we talk with persons with disabilities. So whenever we have a communication between the individuals in a society, we have to use the terms that are inclusive in nature, and treat adults with disabilities as adult. Not you should not have a baby talk, and it is not appropriate. And when we talk with people with disabilities, speak directly to them and not at their aid or sign language interpreter or the assistant who are with them. So talk to their eye level if necessary, sit in a chair if they are in a wheelchair on the same level, so that a person who uses a wheelchair feel comfortable, and listen patiently and attentively to a person who has difficulty, and speak to them, and do not try to finish their thoughts for them. So you need to give a chance for them to express their own thoughts. And remember that a person's mobility equipment is part of their personal space. So don't move a wheelchair, cane or a scooter without their permissions. So these are some of the things or guidelines that has been given in a study which has been conducted in forming an inclusive society. And not all disabilities are visible or apparent, but this does not make them any less real. So be mindful that people with cognitive or psychological disabilities, they have different ways of coping with their conditions. So we need to focus on those things, and we should not behave in an offensive way, and we should not express the inability in front of others, those who are not having any disability. So don't pretend to have a disability, or disability person experiences should be designed or tailored and purposefully, and they need to focus on their positive aspects and not on their negative things. So Indian government financial support has been provided for building an inclusive society for persons with disabilities, and lot of grant and aid were provided for making the children or the individuals with disabilities to be more included in a society. Nearly 465 crore has been utilized in the last 3 years, and 7.60 lakh benefited through camps. There nearly 5,624 camps has been raised, and tricycles has been given to the persons with individuals disabilities, and cochlear implantations, nearly 840 cochlear implantations has been done, and 172 hospitals they have done this cochlear implantation successfully, and inclusive society has been what to say, become in reality in India with the provision of lot of assistive and adaptive techniques, methods, materials, devices for the children with disabilities, and they have been trained to meet the needs of a society and effectively included in a society. So inclusive society is a smart society where a smart city have a inclusive people, and they have a smart economy, they have a smart environment, they have a smart government, they have a smart living environment, they have a smart mobility. So when these things are ensured, I am sure that this inclusive society will be in a effective manner where all the marginalized groups, in particular persons with disabilities, are also included in a society effectively, and they will be able to contribute to the benefit of the nation, and they can be a part of our national development. Thank you for giving this opportunity. Thank you once again.